you tried to condense into like an overview of just your path to what's
Oh
led
my
you to
goodness.
now? I know that's a tough one.
You know, I was born in Holland, migrated to Australia when I was 4 years old. My parents migrated to Australia. I grew up in the River Murray, which is a gorgeous river system, which is like the Nile in Egypt. It's kind of an oasis in the desert, and loved growing up there. Then went to university, an honours degree in psychology, and then fell in love with an actress. Spent the next, 10, 12 years doing theatre and music, played in rock and roll bands. Got to explore myself through other characters, through creativity, especially with the rock and roll era. It was like a good chance to kind of consciously live out the shadow aspects of myself. And from there, I was always using psychedelics. I started psychedelics early at 17 when I was at university. So, LSD and mushrooms and mescaline were always very important to me, and as part of my spiritual growth. And then I also found Osho at a certain point in my 30s and spent some time, years in India with him in an ashram, which was extraordinary, absolutely amazing, mind-blowingly opening. And at the same time, I was still working as an actor. I was a professional actor for 25 years. And later on moved into film and television. And so I had these little hats that I'd wear. I'd wear this, sometimes I'd be a therapist, and sometimes I'd be a musician, and sometimes I'd be an actor, and kind of never really felt that I was any one of those things, but it just seemed like a good thing to do at the time because it was fun. Each one of those was fun to me. But I never really felt that I'd hit my true purpose. And so in my early 40s, I was thinking, what is it? What am I meant to be doing here, And then I came across ayahuasca through Terence McKenna, and he introduced me to ayahuasca, and suddenly, as ayahuasca found me, it started to make sense of all the previous years of my life where I'd been exploring all these different avenues, and they all appeared to come together in one umbrella where I could work with psychotherapy, could work with music, could work with, like counseling and being able to hold, groups of people, sometimes large groups of people, in a sort of a congruent kind of, what's it called? A morphic field. So just creating a field of energy. And so, when I first met one of my teachers, Don Jose Campos, he said, to be a shaman, you need to be a psychiatrist, you need to be a musician, and you need to be a bit of a performer, and I thought, then that suddenly made sense. All those years of just scattering around, doing this, doing that, just following wherever my bliss went. But ultimately that led me to ayahuasca. And so the last 25 to 30 years, I've just been deeply involved in that pathway and helping to open up pathways around the world. And I feel that, that's all shifting now too as well. But in a nutshell, that's been the progression of my life. I've left huge swathes of it out, but that's within a few minutes,
Yeah, it's amazing how all of those before you're 40, everything you're doing just perfectly played into.
I can't believe it, because now when I look back on my life, obviously everything I did up until ayahuasca found me was a preparation for that. It was a training ground. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was just following what felt like fun to do. And I loved acting. I loved the way you could use it as a way to explore yourself by playing all kinds of different characters and getting inside the psychology of different characters, observing people all the time, observing oneself all the time. So it was a kind of a spiritual exercise. In fact, Osho called it the most spiritual of all professions, because when you're an actor, you need to be at least 90 to 95% identified with the character, but there's still always that 5 to 10% that's aware you are the actor playing the character. And so that's not very different to life if you apply the same practice. You can be going through the whole parade of your life, which you are identifying with, but if you can keep the 5 to 10% as an awareness of that, so there's a witness, knowing that you are not that, but you are playing out this role in life, then that's a very valuable thing to cultivate. So acting's very good in that regard. It was good training.
your name, Dar Pan, is that come from Osho?
Yeah, Osho gave me that. He called me Swami Vimal Dar Pan. I'm a Swami. And that Vimal Dar Pan means pure mirror. And I thought, whoa. At first I thought, whoa, that's a big... But then I figured that Osho probably gave us the names that we were the exact opposite of, So I was probably a very dusty mirror, and he was giving me the aspiration to become a pure mirror, a clear mirror. But anyway, yeah, that has reflected, excuse the pun, a lot to myself. Just that name and meditating on that name, and meditating on the qualities of a mirror, meditating on the qualities of reflections and projections and perceptions. It's a very rich kind of kernel mantra, a seed mantra to just go deep inside. And over the years that I've been using that name, it has opened up more and more and more, and particularly, in the most recent stages in my life, it's starting to become a little bit more clear. I would never have thought it would have had such a big impact, I mean, when I thought change my name, well, my name was pretty tiresome. My name was Henricus Johannes Fischerdijk. It's the title I got when I was born. That was shortened down to Hank. Now, I always hated that name growing up because it would kind of reminded me of country and western music, Hank Williams, Hank Snow, and Hank all these other dudes. And I didn't like country and western at all. I was not vibrating with that. So I thought, well, I'll go for it. When I took sannyas and he gave me Dar Pan, I took it on. And but it is very powerful, the impact it has upon your life on every level, on a vibratory level. People calling you a certain sound, the syllables within those sounds, like Dar Pan, and having the overtone of, I guess it was, it really opened up things in me that weren't open when I was Henricus Fischerdijk, or Hank, And I've been called Dar Pan now for probably getting on for 40 years, 35 years. So it's funny for me to think of me being called Hank. I mean, I do not relate to it at all anymore. And yet I still use it when I go through, customs. Here's my passport, But it's an interesting game that you play, But it's true that the vibration of certain sounds within the name are very powerful on a very deep level, and it pervades all areas of your life. So it's a good thing to do. And I can see why Osho used it as a device for his sannyasins, because it makes you really, and to wear a certain color. Thank God I didn't have to wear the orange color for very long, because I don't like orange. But it's also a powerful thing to do, to change your clothing, because you have to other people see you completely differently. And that can be a very healthy thing in shaking up an old identity. So I think it's healthy for people to change their name a lot, just so they don't get attached to one thing or one identity or one egoic projection, personality, or whatever.
That makes a lot of sense. I don't see it as Hank.
No.
Can you talk a little bit about meeting Sam and some of the times you've had together?
Well, Sam and I have been peripherally kind of in satellite with each other over our lifetime. He's visited many of the same places, both spiritually, emotionally, sexually, physically, as I have, but at different times. We weren't always in the same place at the same time, but generally moving through. What I feel with Sam is, when I first met him, was a kind of a synchronicity of spirit, like a kind of somebody who's from the same seed soul group, where you feel there's certain things that is understood on the natch, because you have a certain basic psychic, emotional, spiritual orientation. So, but Sam and I, we met, actually, we would have been in places like in India and other places when we didn't even know each other. And we had so many mutual friends, so many people who we already knew, who were we were part of the web even when we met. So this is the first real adventure I've taken with Sam, just going off and doing something together. But we've always coincided at many places, festivals, places, just meetings, core soul group kind of connections, that sort of thing. And we've always known each other through a whole wide web of friends. And so we've kind of danced around in all of that morphogenetic field for how long? 20, 30 years? And so, yeah. And this is just, I mean, I haven't taken a holiday for 30 years. I travel all the time, but usually it's for work. And so this was the first time I've just like left my guitar at home, just gone for a holiday. So great to meet with you. And we're saying, because I came here not knowing at all what was going to happen. I was coming empty-handed, open-hearted, whatever happens, happens, and just an intent to follow intuition, follow spirit without hesitation. And so, you know, I was really open. Whatever Sam's opened up for us is good for me, you know. But then he said, oh, you mind if Charlie comes? I said, no, not at all, of course not. So let's have Charlie. And so then the three of us were there, and then the Trinity was complete. And then we just started to just like, yeah, it was magical how it arrived, even in the first place, the Zona del Silencio, that we looked that day on the map, and we were just all captivated by just the geometry of it and the placement of it and the kind of mystic allure that it had, you know, because I was enjoying the crew that we were with. It was fun. It was great. But the past two eclipses that I'd seen were in that context, in a party context, lots of other people partying, hanging out. But this one I felt, because of what was going on in me too, I was in a more kind of reflective mode anyway, to just, yeah, when that came up and we just took hold of the spirit. And then we were, as we discussed earlier, we had a series of like checkpoints we had to get through, like series of tests or challenges. Do you really want to go on this, or is it easier to go with the slipstream of what's known, you know? And we opted for the unknown each time. And I think the boldness is the better part of, you know, like when you follow that spirit, magic and miracles always happen rather than what you expect to happen, you know, which would have been good also. So I'm really happy we had an adventure, like a real adventure. It was like taking off into something that we didn't know. Could have all been a complete washout, like a drag, but it wasn't. It opened up into this incredible journey. It was an inner as well as an outer journey for me, very much an inner journey. And it was just enacted through the three of us encountering this incredible domain, this amazing topography that is really special, characterized by all those anomalies, like the geomagnetic anomalies, the strange effects upon devices, you know, the devices stop working, and that it's on the same parallel as the Bermuda Triangle, and that, you know, ETs was purported to be seen there, and strange lights in the sky, and sounds, and strangely mutated creatures and reptiles. And so I just had that era of sort of like adventure, you know, which is in keeping with Aries, which is where the eclipse was taking place, in Aries, and which is the adventurer. It's the one that's bold, doing it, you know, action. And that's what we did, and it was so magical. So I'm very grateful to have shared that with both of you, you know, like, yeah, amazing. It was a real challenge. And for me too, having had a bad foot, you know, I didn't want to be left behind, didn't want to hold you guys up. So it was just like, just do it, you know. And that was part of my journey, you know.
Yeah, if that was me, I would have been fussing about it constantly. So.
No, it was just I had Chiron square Chiron. Which is, Chiron represents the wounded healer. And so it's bringing up vulnerabilities, physical, emotional, psychic, you know, and just work with them. But you don't let them stop you, but you feel them, embrace them, accept them, and still do what you want to do.
Maybe you could just talk a little bit more about what your time at the ashram, what did that look like day to day, and what you were doing?
Well, you know, that time in the ashram was in my early 30s, so it was like really the prime of my life, physically, and you know, I mean, I was pulled there definitely by Osho. Many of my friends were pulled by the beautiful women, the promise of free sex, all of these things, and also by the guru, but for me it was very much about that, because I'd already had the opportunity to live out my sexuality by that time, because I'd been into rock and roll for years, and so it wasn't that in particular. although that was a very enjoyable and a very great part of it, of was meeting the most amazing people. You know, like every day you'd meet somebody you'd fall in love with. You know, that would happen every day. You know, because you have reflections of so many, at different times there are up to 8 to 10,000 people there in the peak season. And so to keep that many people living in an organic harmony for any length of time is a feat. And so you asked me what the day would look like. Well, when I was working as a musician there, so, you know, I'd wake up in the morning, go to dynamic. You know, I wasn't always doing dynamic, but for a period of time I did. So that would look like getting up 5:30, getting there for 6, do the dynamic, which is a very active meditation, cathartic, and then just in silence, and then dance. And then after that, I get my chai and go straight over to Buddha Hall, which is like at that time a flat marble floor of immense proportions, this huge like circus tent over it. And all the sannyasins would gather there for morning discourse. And when everybody was in together, you know, like we'd be doing a few processes, everybody would be in full meditation. Osho would come in, take his place in the chair, and for 2 hours he would just deliver these just exquisite discourses that would just take you to the heights. And then so you're there with the master, which was always the highlight of the day. Then you get out and about after that and do your work. Like for me, it was listening to the music that we played the night before in the evening discourse sessions. And, you know, you'd have time for food. The food was in the ashram. You'd go out and about. Like I didn't live in the ashram. I just lived outside in a place called House of Love near on the river. It was right on the river, beautiful place. And yeah, you just at night in the evening there'd be discourse again with Osho for 2 hours. You know, you do Kundalini meditation during the day. You'd have choice of various different meditations. Some people would do groups like Tantra groups or primal groups or encounter groups, but having that discipline of doing dynamic every day for everybody was really great, because any stresses or any kind of like pent up energies or emotions or repressed feelings would be given vent to in that early morning. And so you just, rather than dumping it on people, you dump it in the morning there. And so that ran in very beautiful harmony then. It was like looking back, it was a template for how human beings can live together in real, you know, togetherness and openness and complete transparency and honesty. For that reason, it stands out as being a really golden period in my life, because after Osho left the body and we had to re-enter society in the West, if you stayed that open, people would be so confronted and so scared, particularly with being really honest about your sexuality and stuff. And so you had to kind of step it back a bit and keep playing the games that everybody else was playing in order to make them feel comfortable, which was a kind of a slight loss of grace. But now, more and more, I don't pander to that anymore. And if somebody can't meet me on that level, that's okay. It's fine. I'm just as good on my own as, you know. So it was a golden period. And so that was living from 87 till about 91 when Osho left the body. And I was there on and off during those periods. So I still had a business in the West. I was still working as an actor and I was still doing other things. So I'd come and go back and forth. But it was a beautiful immersion into a template that I feel, now that it's been imprinted in the collective consciousness, not just in Pune, but in other places as well, I believe it will be the template of the future, when people, rather than being in nuclear families, in cities where they're completely separated from even their next door neighbor, they don't even know who that person is, maybe. Coming back into pods, back into small communities that are high-tech, cybernetically connected, and are much more kind of like, I guess, autonomous, but connected cybernetically to the whole. And I think there's that's what we're missing in the West, is we've lost that community connection. We're separated. We're living in division and paranoia and mental illness and all of that, which is a result of not being connected. And I saw how important that was during those days in the ashram. So I think that will eventuate, but we have to go through a lot of cleansing and a lot of purging before that will naturally start to arise within people.
You said you went to ayahuasca in terms of how did that connection?
Well, When I first started to really investigate ayahuasca, I was connected to a group, an ayahuasca study group. There was about a dozen of our friends, or maybe not even that many, 9, 10 people. We were connected. We were listening to a lot of Terence McKenna tapes, reading all the books, sharing information about ayahuasca. And then one day, a friend came, and he'd been working with acacia, and I had done one acacia journey before Terence came over, but we were talking about, wouldn't it be wonderful to get Terence over to Australia to do some lectures? And I just said, oh no, he's probably way too busy, he's probably got lots of invitations everywhere. But there was this one guy, Sahaja, there who was present, who knew him from Esalen Institute. And he said, oh, I'll just flick him an email and see what he thinks, see what he says. And so when we invited Terence over, he said, what, the land of acacias? I'd love to come. So he did, and I was fortunate that he was staying in my place for a while, and we had a chance to really download very deeply, and we formed a very deep bond. And then when he went back when we brought him over, he ostensibly just came to see us, but then quickly, the rest of the country heard he was there, and so he ended up doing a national tour, speaking at different places around the world. But initially he just came to Byron Bay with us. And then he started sending me little brown bottles of ayahuasca in the mail, which to this day still stands as the Rolls Royce kind of standard, the gold standard for me when I drink medicine. It is the best medicine. It's so powerful, so good. And I was very lucky to be weaned on that for the first 2 years of my drinking kind of history. And he was sending it to me in the mail, with little markings on the bottle going standard dose and heroic dose. Yeah, and so but then sadly he left the body. He had that tumor in his brain, and so that was only a couple of years after, 2.5 years after we met. So I didn't get to build upon that, but he left an indelible mark in my soul, his influence. And that he initiated me into that wonderful medicine, for which I'm eternally grateful.
I can't imagine you just sitting around for dinner in Byron Bay, just having dinner with Terence McKenna, just the conversations.
Oh, the conversations were wild, man. He stands as the best raconteur I've ever met. Like, he could go anywhere. There's nowhere he wouldn't go, when he just introduced any topic. So it was very entertaining, very good.
Can you share any kind of little nuggets about, he said that sticks out?
Well, not more than what you'd read online or hear online. It was more his presence that I really drank in. There was more stories than I can even remember, but the general feeling was he was like, to me, I felt him as a frontline herald. Announcing, opening the emissary, the one who was bringing these medicines and putting them on the table in front of the Western psyche, going, wow, check this out, and particularly, of course, around DMT. And, he was just put all that on the table, really, for serious consideration, which up until then had been only privy to a very select group of psychonauts or, shamans or healers. But he more or less opened it up in the same way that Leary did with LSD, he did with DMT. And so he played a very, very important role, although a very controversial role, in the opening of the whole notion of ayahuasca and the sacrament that was in South America. And it happened to coincide with another character called Drunvalo Melchizedek, when he was saying that, the Kundalini center on the planet was based, which had been previously based in India or Tibet, Nepal, India, around that area. At a certain point in the 90s, moved towards South America. How, I don't know, but you'd have to check that with Melchizedek. But I can really get a sense of that, because just as when the Maharishi or the Beatles first went to India back in the early 70s or late 60s, and it was the trigger or the catalyst for a whole onslaught of hippies to go there in search of enlightenment and, mantras and yogi teachers. In a similar way, McKenna played that role for this whole next wave of seekers to go to South America. And it was the next generation of seekers that went there. And it seems like a a really good natural development, really, because India being very ancient, mystical country, and Peru and South America being a more youthful, a more recent version of that, but it's still the same mystical quality, but just a more youthful, alive, vibrant, I guess you'd say. Although the deep mysticism of India is something that you can't match anywhere else on the planet.
Because I guess you could say now the kind of openness and receptiveness to medicine, mushrooms, etc. is as open as it's been since maybe the 60s.
Well, it was Richard Nixon in 1971 with the Psychotropic Conventions Act who came down hard on all psychedelics because Leary and crew et al., Ram Dass and all of what they catalyzed in the youth scared the fuck out of this establishment. So they went immediately, demonized all of that. Put it in Schedule 1, which is sort of like up there with heroin and crack cocaine and the really hard drugs, and stopped all research. That was the most devastating thing. All research was stopped until the late 90s when they were able to do DMT research. Dr. Rick Strassman was given dispensation by the DEA to do DMT research, and also under the auspices of the Scottish Rites of Freemasons, who interestingly date back to Egypt, and they use acacia as one of their symbols, and probably have used that line of sacrament in their higher echelons as well. So, it was a pivotal role he played, like a frontline herald, like paving the way.
Why do you think psychedelics are such a threat to the establishment? Why are they perceived as such a threat?
That's easy because it dissolves boundaries. It dissolves structures. It makes you question the outside reality and rely more upon inner authority. And if you're in the business of keeping a system of control and daily kind of consensus reality, or otherwise known as mass hypnosis, then you don't want anything dissolving those boundaries at all. And you don't want people questioning the status quo. You don't want people questioning authority. And you want people to maintain their belief in doctors, lawyers, priests, politicians. Otherwise, the whole thing falls apart because it's a house of cards. And what psychedelics do is they teach you to disengage, not necessarily disagree with. If there are certain rules and regulations in the status quo, mostly the status quo wants you to believe in those things. And what the psychedelics do is that they create more reliance upon inner knowing, inner authority, and then you can question or check the outer authority with your inner knowing. And if it's incongruous, you go along with it. And if it's not, you call it out and you say, no, that doesn't feel right for me, rather than blindly believing what the priests and the politicians dish out. So it's like questioning the kind of ancestral belief systems, which are man-made, and reconnecting to those more universal systems which are in alignment with nature, and then from there operating in that level. Not to say that the outer society is wrong, but you just connect with those parts that are in congruence with nature, and you don't necessarily participate with those parts that go against that. So that's why it's a threat to the society, because it makes you question everything. And it dissolves the boundaries of what you normally think who you are. It makes you question who you are. And that's something that the society doesn't really want you to question, because they want you to get your Joe Bloggs, you're a psychiatrist, that's what you do, you have 2 children, this is how you fit in society. But, the psychedelics ask you to go a little deeper than that. And when you go deeper, it's actually very fruitful and very rich in what are the revelations that arise, but not necessarily in congruence with the outer structure. If it is, well and good, but if it's not, you'll question it. So that's why the society sees it as a threat.
It does seem like it's already indisputable that mental health epidemic, there's a lot of disconnection, as you say. But in the future, how can psychedelics help more people to reconnect?
Oh, I think that's already happening. There's a lot of money being put into research and psychedelic research right now. In fact, a good sign is that all the venture capitalists are hovering around the potential blooming of the psychedelic industry. It'll soon, my prediction is it'll become $1 billion industry in the next, you know, several years. Just as yoga, when I was younger, was considered to be a freak show, you had to be a freak to do yoga. It's now $1 billion industry, multi-billion dollar. It shows how the whole collective has shifted about looking at something they thought was cultish, weird, and sort of occultish, to accepting it as a daily, healthy part of their lives. Similarly with psychedelics, it's been demonized since '71 with Nixon, and given a very bad rap, very bad kind of profile. But now, of course, with more and more research happening and younger generations coming up who have a different view of it, now it's used for cognitive enhancement. I mean, in Silicon Valley, microdosing has become almost an obsession. Microdosing LSD, mushrooms, cactus, whatever, you name it, as a way of cognitive enhancement, increasing visual acuity, just making you more on. It just fires the synapses and the nerve, the gaps, just everything seems to go a little bit better. But also in the higher doses, of course, having major spiritual revelations. And rather than it making you crazy, it can be actually used to heal mental illness, used in the right way. And Dr. Stanislav Grof has done groundbreaking work in that, and especially with his work in the Spiritual Emergency Network, which he started with his wife Christina Grof, where they were helping people who are schizophrenic, rather than seeing them as being sort of like clinically, like just trying to quell the symptoms with drugs. They'd take them through what they considered to be a spiritual crisis, and opening that up and just helping deliver them through that, which is what psychedelics are really brilliant at doing. At like bringing you through a kind of a death rebirth situation so that you can be, in the Christian terminology, be reborn, at least in a kind of a spiritual or psychic sense. And that's very, very deeply healing if you experience that. So I think that, the transformative qualities of it, we're only just starting to understand it, but just the sort of like more medicinally, kind of still more body-based, more kind of, the microdosing is proving very, very good. I mean, most people in business who are hip are doing that now. And I think there's a huge future for it as the whole spin on psychedelics gets changed. Instead of it being demonized, it can be seen as a total enhancement on every level, mental, spiritual, physical, emotional. Not only an enhancement, but transformative, where people can be birthed into a whole new paradigm of awareness and sort of grow up, if you like, take responsibility as a full, conscious, sovereign human being. That's where psychedelics will lead.
In this future where psychedelics have become more widely used and benefited, what kind of consideration should there be for the way it's consumed? Does it need to be in traditional peyote circles or ayahuasca shamanic, very ritualistic, ceremonial kind of context? How does the West find that?
That's a great question, because it's super important. I mean, of course, the indigenous peoples have developed their traditions and rituals as safe containers for taking these sacraments. And many people from the West who kind of misunderstand and they think that that's the only way you can do it. They take on those rituals and those belief systems without really questioning how they came to be in the first place. And really what they represent, when you take away the kind of cultural iconography and belief systems out of it, is a safe container. It's a safe container. They developed it through their cultural accoutrements into the way that felt natural and good for them. That doesn't mean as a Westerner you have to adopt their way, because they've got a completely different mindset to we have. So I started myself just taking it in, like I knew that set and setting was super important, because Leary made a big deal about that when he's in his first little book, Psychedelic Experience, where he went turn on, tune in and drop out. It was a very idealistic little book and sort of, very, very naive in a certain way, but some of the beautiful things that he transmitted in there was the importance of set and setting. Setting being exactly where you are, set being what you're bringing yourself, your mindset. So as a young psychonaut, I was aware of that. So I'd always take psychedelics in beautiful natural surroundings, like, beautiful valleys, or, forests, or on the ocean, or, somewhere like that. And only with people I really loved and trusted. Later, when I got more bold, I would take it in more, let's say, less predictable environments like rock festivals, and then when I got really confident, I could take it anywhere. I'd walk up to a policeman and have a conversation because I was just so confident in the space. But in the beginning, I think it's very important for people when they come across these sacraments to really take care, to create a really safe and a really a trusted space with trusted people, because you're entering into new territory. And in order to go into those new territories, it's good to have a map. And I would recommend anybody who's going into those territories to read Dr. Stanislav Grof. He's got a hyperspatial map called the Birth Perinatal Matrices. I won't go into it here, but it's basically a map of psychedelic space, of hyperspatial realms. And he divides them into 4 basic states of consciousness that you can enter into on these sacraments. And basically it's a heaven state, hell state, transformation state, then death, rebirth. And so it is very important to create a safe container. Yeah. And I think once you've found your sea legs and you feel really confident, then you're more likely to be able to do it in places, of your choosing. But I would say for anybody coming to these substances for the first time, be aware of that. Be aware of set and setting and who you're doing it with and what your intention is, why you're doing it, and to take care that it wouldn't be interrupted and that you're basically, the safety is more on a psychic level. Certainly physical, but on a psychic level. So you're not having some strange left of field event happen that you suddenly have to deal with. Yeah. So, but I think that, young people are starting to open up, and they are suddenly, my generation stretched the envelope within the collective of, Sam and I, opening up by having so many psychedelic experiences that the next generation, through the genetic passing on, it's easy for them to come more into it because it's already there in the code. And I noticed that with my son Tashi. He can just enter into it. It's not a big deal for him. Yeah, I can do it or not. Whereas for me, it was an obsession because we had to stretch that part of the envelope. But I think that these tools will be used and are beginning to be used, not just for healing and for more clinical situations, but also for self-actualization, spiritual enhancement or realization, experience. It's given the right circumstances and the right conditions, and I think these things will emerge as we enter deeper into exploring psychedelics in the West. Certain modalities, I believe high-tech versions of what would have been done in the indigenous tribes will emerge, and that these safe places and that will be curated to bring a maximum amount of transformational experience. So you maximize that. So as in the ancient mystery schools, that's what they did, but in a high-tech way. And so it's not necessary to do it how they did it. You just keep the principles of what they did and reinvent it. And I'm sure that's what will happen in a safe and beautiful way, in a way that will be suitable for the Western psyche or for the global emerging psyche.
Presumably more and more therapists and things, more and more conventional therapy will start to use them as tools.
Absolutely. It's already happening. Yeah. I know lots of people who are using it psychotherapeutically, but it's still a little bit under the cover because it's not fully legal yet, or it's already being smiled upon. There are, even in Australia, the TGA has allowed psychiatrists to use MDMA and mushrooms within their clinical work, practice. But it's still highly regulated. It will open up. It will relax. And full research and study will be done and available, and these things will naturally evolve like an opening flower.
Challenges you've experienced, any challenge that you've gone through, something you found difficult that you weren't?
Oh, I've been to the bone, man, to the bone. You don't walk this path without any challenges. Certainly it can be smooth sailing at different times, but the squall will come. It always does. And you better be prepared for it. That's all I can say if you're doing this work. Because, yeah, sure, I mean, I've had to endure the experience of brujeria, like really invidia, projection onto me by various groups at different times. I've had to endure the law, justice, where I got arrested for importing, a couple of bottles of ayahuasca into Australia. I was under house arrest for a year. I was facing 25 years in jail and or $100,000. A dear friend of mine had to mortgage her property because my bail was $350,000. And for a year I was facing that. So, I thought in ayahuasca I dealt with all my doubt, I dealt with my fear, but it took a situation like that to show me that in the corner of my soul, I absolutely still had fear. I still had doubt. I still had anxiety and fear, And so, it was, in retrospect, a massive rite of passage. All of these things are, including the brujeria that I had to experience. There are rites of passage. And it's like the spiritual helpers who are helping you with this work are testing you, are seeing how you're going to react with this. And so, along the way, I started to totally apply it from that point of view rather than reacting to the situation. And it taught me things about myself that I could never have learned in anywhere else. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. It was a fucking harrowing experience, all of them, the challenges I had to face. But I don't regret any of it, not one little bit of it, because I learned so much about myself. And that's invaluable, that's priceless. How could you invent, unless you had a situation like that, you wouldn't be challenged to look deeply inside of yourself. But the first thing I had to learn was not to submit to fear or to intimidation. And that was a big task in itself. But then, once, every night, I was going into those fear spaces and measuring my fear. I'd go into the fear and there it is, and I'd go to the outer edges of it like a cartography. I was mapping the edges of my fear. And then I'd go, fuck, there it is, this is what it feels like, this is it feels yucky, horrible. And then I'd go, I created this. Therefore, I can discreate it. And I'd see it like a plug coming out of the television. And I'd do that night after night after night until genuinely there was no fear there anymore. And at that point I was saying, okay, I'll go to jail. I'm ready for it. I'll do anything. I'm in, because halfway through the medicine, the allies told me, look, if this is too much, we'll get you out of this scot-free. But I said, no, I'm in, boots and all. What the fuck? What else am I going to do? And they did. In the end, I got off the whole charge without conviction. I didn't have to pay anything. All my lawyers' bills were paid by wealthy clients. I just had to go through the experience, as I did with varying experiences of brujeria. It was a way of teaching. It was a way of learning about the dark side. It was a way of coming to a crossroads as a practitioner of being tempted to go down that dark side, of being tempted to retaliate, of being tempted to I'll just leave it at that. Or whether to just hold it and tweak the internal kind of software and shift it and work it that way. And I couldn't have learned that anywhere else. I couldn't have. You can't teach someone that. You only learn that by experience. So in that sense, I'm very grateful. And of course, major challenges. I could talk to you at length for that, but let's just leave it there for now.
I would find personally, I find it enraging to think that you'd be put in jail, bringing something that's truly helping people in a really profound way.
And that's just one aspect of it. Yatra Silveira de Barbosa, who is A Brazilian shaman, a woman who taught me the ways of Jurema back in the late 90s, she said to me, Dar Pan, when you walk this path, you're going to get some very powerful projections onto you. Some of them are going to be really beautiful, some are going to be really demonic and dark. She said, beware of the beautiful ones. They're the most tricky. You know, when people come and they go, Dar Pan, thank you, you've changed my life. Wow, you've done, oh my God, I can't. And you kind of go, at first I'd be really embarrassed about that, you know, when people did that. And then I'd go, hang on, what's that embarrassment about? And look inside and I go, oh, fuck, it's reverse ego. Like obvious ego goes, yeah, I'm great, yeah, I healed you, whatever. But reverse ego goes, no, that's not me, I can't, you know. And so I thought, what's happening here in this dynamic? And really saw that the person was just offering something, a gift. And not to take it on board as an identity, just to allow the energy with grace. And just to let it go straight out through your feet. You don't hang on to it for a second. Because it's the really beautiful ones that you can become the baggage for your ego if you take them on board. And of course you get the demonic ones. You're the fucking Lord of Darkness. You're the black magician. You're doing this and that and rah, rah, rah. And you know, when you're in the early stages, it really hurts because you want to be liked by everybody. And suddenly people are going, making these judgments. And these are people who are friends. Happened at different times in my career, like really coming, because Australia has this thing called a tall poppy syndrome. If you start to become good at what you do, they try to cut you down. And that's what so many people tried to do. They targeted me because I was the poster boy for ayahuasca in Australia. And I had to wear that. And that was a really, really challenging part as well. It's not nice to be on the receiving end of that, no. And I saw my teacher, Jose Campos, get on that. He was so demonized in his area because the Shipibo were getting very jealous that he was getting all the Western, clients. And so they were throwing a lot of juju at him, and I experienced it within his dietas and his ceremonies many times. And it's a very real thing, let me tell you. But once again, much like David Icke when he talks about it, after a while I just got to go, whatever you see in me is your business, it's not mine. And therefore I know who I am and I accept that. And so I just, so after a while it was like water off a duck's back. And now I'm genuinely can say I don't give a shit what people think about me. I don't give a fuck. I know who I am, and I know the people who love me for who I am. And most of the criticism I get is from people who don't really know me. Many who've never met me before, but they've just heard rumors, talks, gossip, slander. And you have to wear that. And in the beginning it's really tough because your ego gets battered. But now you just laugh at it. It's like, wow, what an incredible journey, and what a great tool to discover yourself. So how could you ever judge it as being bad?
I just want to do astrology again. Just the way you explain the influence that these things can have on a person.
Yeah.
Human design, star sign,
well, all of these are ancient modalities. They're like structures or like... it's like the clothes hanger, like you have to have something to hang things on. And like the I Ching comes from ancient China, maybe Lao Tzu, and and it was purportedly from seeing the designs of a back of a turtle, and 64 hexagrams. There are 64 codons in the human genome. So suddenly you get these mystics throughout time who just channel a system through, because everything is synchronicity. If you start to see patterns of something, you can create your own structure, your own, and I think that over time, astrology, numerology, I Ching, tarot, and other forms of divination have just over time proved their worth. And whether you believe it or not is more the question. But the fact is that it would not have sustained that long unless it was hitting some deep archetypal reality within the deeper levels of the psyche than just the little 10% of conscious awareness. And so I think it's plumbing these deeper levels archetypally that these systems and of divination, or as you say, astrology or human design, emerge as a way of mapping them and being able to work with them in a kind of a synergistic, constructive way that you can apply it in a practical way towards yourself, making sense of the synchronistic maelstrom that we're in every moment. Just finding ways to translate that or step that down into a kind of a conceptually, into a concept, yeah, an understandable structure. So human design is a combination of three of them, like I Ching, numerology, and astrology. And as such is really quite a potent structure. Ra Uhuru, the guy who came up with it, reportedly downloaded it after a massive ayahuasca journey. It might have been LSD, I don't know, but it was some psychedelic that he took. And then he had this 8 days stream of download in which all his information came through. And from that, he developed this system called human design, which, yeah, you should just for your own self, you don't have to believe or disbelieve it. Just go and have it done and see what resonates. You know, this is my approach to all these things. I don't believe or disbelieve anything, really. I just see how it resonates against my own being. And if it resonates, I take it on board. If it doesn't, I just put it in either the basket that doesn't matter, or if it really don't resonate, I just throw it in the bin. But, you know, so I use my own compass to determine whether something is of use or not. So it's not a belief, oh, this system's great, or that, because people have lots of different, ideas about everything. So you have to have some compass to be able to navigate through all the divergence of opinions and structures and systems and find one that's right for you. There's another one called the Enneagram, which is really interesting, which Gurdjieff brought from Asia, and it's also a really, really interesting structure or system. And whichever one you choose, you can start to make it work for you, because it's not just learning the language, it's then reconnecting to your intuition and your own inner sense of knowing. And the structure or the system allows you to make sense of your intuition, or to translate your intuition through that and give it some form or shape that's translatable to another human being, basically. It all comes from just experience, doing it again and again. When I was playing with the I Ching in my 20s or studying it, I'd be throwing it every day, that's the way you get to know it. It also makes it weaker, less potent when you do it every day. But now I use it maybe once or twice a year. But when I do it, right on, because I already know the whole hexagram before I read it. But it's the fact that you don't use it a lot, and that when you do use it, you bring your totality to it. If you overuse it, your mind comes in and starts thinking, is it this or is it that? And it starts doubting, or. But yeah, it's a very potent system if you allow for the notion of synchronicity, in the sense that Jung talked about it.
Maybe a tricky one, quite general one. Where is the world at, and where is it going?
Oh my goodness. You know how to ask questions, don't you? Well, the world is at a state of great purification. It's the demise of or the dissolution of an old structure, talking about structures, an old paradigm or belief system or reality map that is in the process of dissolution. And as such, it's bringing up a lot of confusion, chaos, anxiety, fear, worry, anger, aggression, threatening, it's just a soup at the moment of all kinds of shadow emanations of the lower chakras. And I think that although a lot of people bemoan this, I think it's a very good thing. We need to have that. Everything needs to be shaken up. Everything needs to be questioned. Everything needs to be thrown up and see what it's really worth. Because for so long we've been in the race hypnosis of believing what the priests and the politicians have told us and what the reality map is, and we've operated very well within that. But times are changing. We're changing. Gaia, the whole planet, is changing. And this change can be seen akin to like a puberty. When you go through puberty and everything gets shaken up and you start sexuality, all new hormones come. You question your parents, you in fact aggressively, deny them. until you find yourself and come back and you reintegrate as an adult within the society or the group. Well, I think we're going through that kind of process on steroids, like in the collective, and everything is being questioned now, everything, and will continue to be so. And most people's response to that will be lashing out, and it will be an opportunity for people to go into catharsis, to get rid of any ingrained anger, aggression, rage, fear, hurt, shame, guilt, blame. All of that's going to come up. It's under the focus now, and it's going to get really intense. So this is what I call a purification. A lot of people will see it as the end, as doomsday. I don't. I see that it's a necessary step in the process, because the whole frequency on this planet is rising. It's becoming more fine. And all that dross, those shadow emanations of the lower chakras, need to be let go of. It just can't be taken into the next level. It just won't. It's not congruent. Just physically, psychically can't do it. So all of that has to be expressed and somehow catharted, released, spat out, thrown out of the collective psyche. And generally that comes with cathartic things on the outside, like earth upheaval, or, like war, or great upheaval, great volcanoes, because it's all connected. The earth, us, the solar deity, the solar logos is all connected, and nothing is operating outside of anything else. And so as this shift happens, it's a classic to take that map that I was talking about before by Dr. Stanislav Grof. It's the death rebirth part of the map. It's where we all have to collectively let go, surrender, die to a certain consciousness, and through some momentous event, whether it be a cataclysm, or whether it be a spiritual illumination, or whether it be some violent event that will wake people up out of their hypnosis, out of the kind of consciousness that they've been in, to realize that everything is connected as one, and that we've been behaving like children, shitting in our own backyard, basically. Still in our nappies. Still asking mummy and daddy how to do it. And it's a time of growing up. It's a time of taking responsibility for who you are, of being sovereign, of being actually a co-creator of this incredible reality, and that we're not confined to the limitations that we were taught at school. It's simply not true. And in fact, it's false. And so now it's a great time of great transformation of consciousness that will reflect down on all the other layers, the mental, the emotional, the psychic, the physical. And how that will happen, I can't tell you, but I can tell you that we're in it right now. This is the state of the world that we see today. Where do I think it's going? I think it's going to a rebirth. I think ultimately it's going to an incredible rebirth of consciousness, such as we cannot even imagine right now. And especially in conjunction with the technology, where science and spirituality have heretofore traveled parallel paths, they're now converging. And it's the radical synthesis of science and spirituality, as in quantum mechanics, which is still hotly debated by the scientific materialists as to the validity of it, will obviously show itself to be the new paradigm, where things are non-local, things are synchronous, things are absolutely connected all over, in potential, if not actually in materialization. And we will come to see that the perceiver is the one. That's where it's all happening, in the perception, as you say, with the two-slit thing. We're coming to momentous, radical shift in the way we think about ourselves and the world around us, and the way who you identify as, and how we then relate to the other. I think all of this is coming up for grabs right now. We're in the maelstrom of that. And both the dissolution and the birthing is happening simultaneously. It's not sequential. It's not like the old is going to fall down and then the new is going to come. No, it's happening simultaneously as we speak. And those who are focused in on this particular vibration, it's transhumanism, fear of AI, I don't know, what about the post-Orwellian dystopia, or those who are seeing that we're birthing into something that the wildest imagination right now cannot even conceive of, and that it is a synthesis of technology and human consciousness, just as this one is. But it just depends which way you're looking at it. You know, are you looking at the old fruit that's falling off the tree, or you're seeing the new one that's just about to ripen? You know, are you seeing a gestalt picture, like, you know, you're seeing the old lady, or oh, it's a young lady, but you can't see them both at the same time. So whatever it is you're seeing, what your active perception is the reality you will start to experience. In that case, there may be a bifurcation, as Sam and I often talk about, of consciousness on this planet, where different people are going through different experiences in consciousness. But I don't know. I have no idea. I'm standing in the bleachers, watching with a wonder and awe at the unfolding of this, because I'm not afraid, because I know where it's going. I've seen it. And I mean, that may be pie in the sky, but it allows me the equanimity to be able to walk through the chaos and through the purification and through the long dark night of the soul, the collective long dark night of the soul, because it's already happened in spirit, but we still in 3D space-time reality have to inexorably walk act out the last little dramas here on Earth, before that time collapse, before there's a new awareness of time. And the time will be considered from the eternal now. And we will refer to the past and the future as a convenience, but it won't be seen as an objective entity, because it'll always be now. So this is a massive shift in awareness and a massive shift in identity, where you don't see yourself as this ego-encapsulated self, but rather see yourself as the one being in resonance with the unified field, the interconnectedness of all things that the ancient indigenous people have always known about, the animists, that all things are connected, everything. But we'll be coming at it from a high-tech quantum level, which will be a beautiful extrapolation, a beautiful evolution into the next phase of human life on this planet.
But there's the technology almost dragging us through that, regardless.
Yeah, it's like who created who? You know, the chicken or the egg. It's like we made a computer, but the computer started feeding back to us, it started changing us, and then we fed back into it, and it fed back to us, and it's this evolutionary spiral. It's actually technology is an evolutionary driver.
What does now look like?
Well, it looks differently in every moment. But the experience of it, when I catch it, is an ever unfolding moment, unfolding like a flower that's like constantly blooming, that you're experiencing moment to moment in a completely seamless presence that is disconnected from the conceptual and belief apparatus that you're working with when you're interfacing with 3D reality. To me, it's like an eternal now. To me, that's the definition of eternity, is simply now. Because it's always been now. It's never not been now. It's now whenever. Even when we think of the future, we're doing it from the moment of now. When we look back on the past, we're doing it from the context of now. So the past and future are projections forward and backward. And while you're engaged with either, you can't be fully in the now. Your consciousness has been usurped by the notion of a future or the memory of a past. And can you really be sure that the memory is true to the past? Or did it ever really happen? These are valid questions to ask. So I've been recently really involved with immersing myself in a practice called Dzogchen. And I very fortunately met a teacher of that a couple of years ago. And I've been avidly studying and reading. Not that reading brings you to it, but it gives you a kind of a framework within which to, again, a structure within which to apprehend that eternal now, which is easy. It's every moment, it's every presence, every fucking second, it's here now. But to actually fully be in it, outside of the thought process that's going on continuously in my mind, is a knack, which is simple as pie, and yet it's the most difficult thing you could try and do if you try and do it. Because you can't try and do it. It's like me trying to get up off this chair. You either get up or you don't. Trying, and that's what the first part is. You try to be in the now. But I was saying to Sam yesterday in the hot springs, it's like this. When you hear me speak, try to listen to what I'm saying without understanding what I'm saying. Really try. Just listen to the sound of my voice is making, the undulations, the intonations, the nuances, but don't make any sense out of it. Stop making sense. If you really try and listen, you can practice all the time, every day. There are moments where you get it, where you're actually just present with sound, with frequency, but the moment you think, oh, this is it, bang, and you're in, and suddenly you're understanding what the person's saying again. That's how easy and that's how difficult it is to be in the now. Like that. So it's a uncoupling from the conceptual process in the brain, in the mind, and coming into what the Buddhists call primordial mind, dharmakaya, original state of innocence, of pure potential, of lack of any kind of projection, just pure here now. That doesn't mean you become an idiot, like I can't relate to people, whatever. No, not at all. Because you can hold that space and still speak and talk and go on. But it's a knack. You have to fall into it. It's like riding a bike. When you first get it, you kind of fall off all the time and think, how the fuck can I ever stay on those two wheels? But after a while, how can I fall off? It's like that. It's a knack. So it's not something you can do. If you try and do it, you're going to miss it. So you have something you have to allow to be there by simply being present and being aware. No matter what, you can do it when you're drunk, you can do it when you're stoned, you can do it when you're just woken up in the morning, you can do it any time, even in your sleep. But it requires, like anything else, practice. It just requires practice. And then slowly, it becomes a knack that just becomes a part of you. And so to me, that was what the meaning of now is, the meaning of moving through time and working with time. Like I'm getting older, I've got no hair on my head, like my body's 71 years old. But that's just because I'm born and I die and time appears to pass in between. But actually that's just an illusion too. So if you can enter into the now, the place you've always been, the place you've never not been, the place you will always be. Apart from the ideas and the beliefs of who you think you are in this body, in this time, in this space, in this earth, that is the time I think is the now. Because it's beyond, it's something that shines through this 3D space-time, but it's not of this 3D space-time. You can't point at it, you can't say where it is, and yet it's everywhere. That's because it's coming from another dimension, but fully able to be experienced as an experience, as a not as a concept, but as an experience. And that's what it takes. It takes that experiential immersion, which goes beyond any conceptual extrapolation.
But what about, like, in terms of just real life stuff? Like, do you think about your 70s? Do you think about what you're going to do next week? Anything like that?
No, I don't, no. No, I mean, like, I wait for invitations, basically, for existence to go, how about this? Or how about that? Then I go, yes or no. But I don't think of things or project into things in the future. Like Sam said, come to do the eclipse with me and Mo. And I went, yeah, I resonate with that. So I always wait for the next step. When I first started doing ayahuasca, it gave me a deep immersion into non-dual awareness. It's an experience of the now. And that has stayed with me ever since that time. And so at that time, when I realized that the medicine was saying that it was coming to help assist in this transformational process on the planet, to shift consciousness, when it gave me this palpable, ineffable experience of non-dual awareness centered in the now, I went, okay, if that's where you're going, I'm in, boots and all. I don't need to know how we're going to get there. That's obviously your business. This little ego body, this body, just give me the next step. Now I trust you where you're going. You've given me the experience. Just give me the next step. And then I said, from then, give me the next step. When that's done, give me the next step. And now I can look back on my life and see this incredible path that I've been blessed to walk that I would not have had the temerity or the courage or the imagination to invent. So it's like having a cosmic coordinator, and you just let go into choiceless awareness, so that you wait for existence to present you with something, and then you can go yes or no. But that's the way I like to work now, rather than going, next year I want to go to Europe. If there's an invitation, I do it. And if I'm meant to be there, something will create the wherewithal to... So it's not like I make decisions or don't make decisions. It's just a repositioning of where I'm coming from with daily life and with life in general. And just bring my full awareness and my full consciousness to whatever I'm given. And then do that to the best of my ability. And the best of my ability is going to be different from day to day, week to week, but always I guarantee it'll be the best of my ability.
It's a very freeing thing, that. I can do it at 90.
I know what you mean, and that's the predilection and the dilemma that a lot of old people find themselves, because they think they're getting to the point of being useless, their body's decaying. What am I going to do? What about what's going to happen in the future? It's a lot of anxiety that it brings, because this is to do with identifying with a very narrow sense of who you think you are. If you think you're only this personality, and that you were only useful insofar as you did your job, and now that you can't do that, you don't feel of any use, of course you're going to feel like trashed out. And so the trick, or the point, is to shift your identity from egoic-based personality to something far more vast that allows for a lot of growth. And even as I get older, I look forward to it. Things get better, because as long as I look after my body, I don't want to be sick or ailing, but keep the body good, mind healthy, it just gets better and better, because you don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need to have ambition to show how worthy you are or how good you are or whatever it is that drives you when you're younger. You let go of all of that, and you just be, and just be with whatever's going down in front of you. And that's fun. That's always fun.
The connection between things like the eclipse, the UFOs that I saw, psychedelics, spiritual practices and medicines. I feel like these things are linked. I'm not quite sure how to articulate what that link is.
Interesting, yeah, because McKenna often talked about, UFOs and the sense of the other, the kind of translucent other, or I think that it's Jacques Vallée, who once did this interesting book called The Spectrum of Consciousness, I think that's what it's the title, where he equated the idea of expanded states of consciousness, or altered states of consciousness, as being, an extrapolation of the cultural belief systems of the time. So, for example, in Ireland, I might see the little green people. In Scotland, I might see fairies. Somewhere else, I might see the orcs, maybe in Siberia, or they might see, somehow superluminal entities, or fourth dimensional entities, let's say, that were acceptable within the psyche of that particular person. Well, as we've evolved in our technology and civilization, we know that we can go to the moon and back, and there's aeroplanes, and we can't believe in those simple folkloric beliefs like fairies or little green people anymore. Some people still see them, but mostly the collective can't, because they can't accept that as a reality. Scientific materialism has put a good end to that. However, they can accept UFOs. They can accept, so the same principle that was creating little green men and goblins and fairies are now showing up in the collective as UFOs, other encounters, other dimensions, other star systems. These are the new kind of cartography of the fourth dimension, of that dimension of intuition and extrapolation of the third dimension, which is very physical, into the repository of the mystery, the school of the the mysteries can't be explained by these entities anymore that people believed in 1,000 or even a few hundred years ago. Now it has to be something more congruent with how we see ourselves within our solar system, within our galaxy. And so UFOs are a very convenient archetypal form for us to extrapolate into that which you used to do into fairies and goblins. And when he put that forward, it kind of resonated with me. I like that idea. I think that it's just the cultural affectation of our times to attribute things beyond our normal sensory experience to the mystery, and the mystery we explain it now through UFOs and extraterrestrials, encounters of the third, fourth, fifth kind. These are more congruent to us as our collective myth than fairies and goblins and were, but they fulfill the same function.
And psychedelics connect because they also are looking beyond.
Well, yeah, if you take psychedelics, particularly ayahuasca, you do see elves, you do see green goblins, you do see fairies, and you do see UFOs. Everything that you can focus upon in the fourth dimension, you can invoke. What do I mean by that? Like in 3 dimension, if you think of something, there's a time gap before the manifestation of that thought. If you want to build a house, you got to get a plan, you've got to get the architects, builders, etc. Then suddenly the house takes place. But in the fourth dimension, what you're feeling and thinking and obsessed or, kind of busy with is what you see. It's like instantly manifesting. So some people say, why do I see demons all the time? Why do I see this? So look within, what are you focused upon, And if you're not focused upon that, look deeper into the unconscious, You're not consciously focused upon it. Because that's the thing, that's the deal there. There's zero gap between the thought and the manifestation of the thought. So it's a new one to realize. And once you realize, it's happening like that in the fourth dimension, which is still a dualistic scape. Still you have all the lords of light and all the lords of darkness and everything in between. But it's the time, element of time there works very differently to in 3D space-time. But the fifth dimensional state, for want of to create another structure, that's the level of the heart, of transformation of the unified field. So it is beyond duality. It goes into a sense of non-dual awareness, which is informing all of the other realities, fourth, third. And so where you identify with is where you position yourself in consciousness. So if you're identified with the fifth dimension and you're still in the third dimension, like for example when Jesus said, I am the way, the truth and the light, I don't think he was big noting himself or doing an ego trip. He was just identifying with fifth dimensional awareness. I am the way, the truth and the light. That's what that is. The fifth dimension is the way, the truth and the light. It's non-dual. And so he's saying, I'm holding that frequency and bringing it down, anchoring it down into this planet, into this 3D space-time reality. And Jesus was really beautiful in the way he tried to do that, but he got strung up and crucified as a result because people totally misunderstood him and thought he was a temporal king. And the Jews or the Pharisees saw him as a threat, that he wanted to make himself a physical king, but he was talking about the kingdom not of this world. He's talking about the fourth dimensional notion of heaven, and anchoring those frequencies in the third dimensional plane. And I think that's what it behooves us to do now, not just for Jesus to be here, but I think is the return of the Christ energy, or the return of the Maitreya, which is what Buddha promised 2,500 years ago that he would return. Christ promised that he would return at this time. I don't think it's an individual or a personality or a human being. It's an awareness, it's a consciousness. And so it behooves us all now to anchor the fifth dimension into the third dimensional plane, not just Jesus or Buddha. We all have to become Buddhas. We all have to become Christ consciousness. That's not being Jesus. Jesus was Jesus. It's being Buddha, and each Buddha is unique and individual. And yet, it's an indefinable thing. It's a state of consciousness, not a personality trait. Yeah, I know. I've never seen a UFO in the physical realm. As we were discussing this the other night in the zone of silence. And when you came back about 1 a.m. in the pitch dark and said, can you see that move? I could see it move. As you said, it's going up and it's going left, and I saw it. And that's when I became intrigued, and I stayed awake looking at that star or that light for some time. But then my mind came in. I started to go, is it the stars? Is it my eyes that are dancing it around? Or is it? But it was uncanny that it was moving exactly to what you were saying at the time. So is that a UFO? I don't know. It was this moving light. Whether that was an optical illusion on my part or whether it was actually existing in the heavens, I don't know. But it was definitely something I saw. And I think that, if I was to see a craft land in front of me, maybe I'd believe in UFOs. But I've seen UFOs in ayahuasca space. And I thought to myself, of course, if there was extraterrestrials, why would they be so gross as to come in on the third dimension in a piece of metal or something physical, when they could be coming in on the psycho-spiritual level, which is exactly how I believe they're coming in. And, in visions or in heightened states of awareness, you can maybe be gifted visions of those fourth dimensional craft. I've yet to see one in the third dimension. I'm not denying that they don't exist. I don't know. I've never seen one. Maybe they do. But I've certainly seen them in the fourth dimension.